I'm Logan Crawford, and right now on Spotlight, every now and then you come across a book that is a lesson in faith. And the next book we're going to discuss is just that. It is called My Neighbor John. It is written by Paul M. Feinberg, PhD, and it is a lyrical book that you will just love. Paul, thank you so much for joining us here today on Spotlight.
Thank you, Logan, for having me.
My pleasure. Tell the folks at home what your book is all about.
Well, my book was originally designed to show how faith and science are not mutually exclusive. And I didn't want to do it as a lecture. Everybody loves a good story. And I've been blessed to go a lot of places and investigate a lot of things. And I've had a science career for a while. And I wanted to tell a good story, but also put in some of the mysteries of biblical faith that some people don't realize are out there, and make it a good blend so that people want to learn more. They want to investigate more, and they'll be entertained with the story. I'm pretty sure, hopefully, that they will be motivated to do that.
Absolutely. I love the setting. I love John's fishing store. It reminds me, I grew up in New Rochelle on the Long Island Sound, and we had little bait shacks like that down by the beach. And it kind of reminds me of that because there was always something mystical or, about them that you wanted to explore a little bit more. And here we have John and Samuel in a relationship and finding each other.
I'm glad you appreciate that. I also, for a short time, I lived on Long Island in Oceanside, and I got that sense of that kind of the fishing community, the mysteries surrounding it, that there's a history involved. Fishermen have stories to tell, and their extraordinary experiences. Sometimes they're the stuff of jokes, but honestly, they do appreciate real danger. The vocation of just taking fish from the sea to live. And this gentleman, John, has a lot of wisdom from a lot of years. So hopefully, Samuel's interaction when he's 8 years old is something that only a young person, like coming into the world, gets that little bite of the universe that it tastes good. He wants to know more.
Absolutely. Well, he's very kind, he's spiritual, and a great friendship grows.
And I like John is the kind of ideal character I wanted to show, where there's a lot of tolerance for youth. Youth ask a lot of questions. I mean, I'm a school teacher and a college professor, and a lot of people love to say there's no such thing as a stupid question. There really isn't, but you got to be patient because people come from different places, and their questions are just as valid. So from wherever they're coming, accept the question and do your best to answer it. You're not always going to be able to answer it on the fly. You might have to actually do a little research and come back and say, you know what? Good question. I'm going to get back to you on that.
Right.
I mean, the thing is, fan the flame of interest. Don't extinguish it, which unfortunately goes on literally. I'm not just thinking of the community at large that's not in the church. I'm talking about within the church as well. There's a lot of people that basically would like you to stay put. Don't think too much about this. And I don't think that's the quite attitude of excitement that would motivate me to go about my daily life if I had to squelch everything I was interested in.
Tell me a little bit about why you wrote this book. It was to teach lessons about science and religion coinciding, but tell me a little bit more about the inspiration and a little bit about the writing process itself.
Well, I'm glad you asked that, because initially, when I was raised in a loving family. My father was Jewish by his ancestry, but when he wasn't practicing, and there's a whole story behind that. And it wasn't because he stopped believing in God. He was angry about something that had happened, believe it or not, during World War II with an older sister. And I completely understand it. And being compassionate to understand him took many years. I pieced it together, and it was later validated. My mother was always a Christian, but the two of them settled on raising us and recognizing the holidays, but lightly. And they were good parents, good values. But I really was spiritually challenged when I got to college, and I literally went into I wanted to be an aerospace engineer. I ended up being a geologist, which actually I'm very grateful that I took that route. But what was interesting was my faith was challenged from day one. when I went in there by a dear friend who was a Muslim. And I was looking for answers and questions, and I was exploring science. And I came into this wonderful book called God and the Astronomers by Robert Jastrow, who was from, I guess, the NASA Goddard Flight Center in Maryland, Aberdeen, Maryland. And it was amazing what he was putting together about the Big Bang Theory and the implications for the Genesis account. Well, during sophomore year, my parents decided to move to Flemington, New Jersey from Spring Valley, New York. And I went to church with my mother, and a local, I guess an elder in that church we were visiting, was asked to close them in prayer. And this literally happens in the book, My Neighbor John. He addresses God in the prayer and says, "We know you didn't create the universe with a big bang." And Samuel's reaction when he bolts from the sanctuary, I was mortified, but I'm not 8 years old. I was 19 or 18 at that point. And I literally went up to the pastor at the end. I said, I don't see the need for the hostility toward that. And he asked me to make an appointment with him, which I did. I went to visit. It was the summertime, so there was some freedom to do that, even though I had a part-time job. Actually, it was full-time at that point, but he still made time for me. And he did not see it my way at all. He was nice, and he gave me good spiritual counsel. But I was wondering, all through the years, as I took more courses in geology and later got my master's and then my doctorate, I really saw a lot of people with legitimate questions, and I wanted to address them because some people are too shy to ask them. You get to a little bit if you're in a social encounter or at a party or something, but that's not enough. I wanted to tell a good story where this theme came up and it had to be answered. And I wanted to explore a lot of things. I do not believe faith and science are mutually exclusive. I do not believe that at all. In fact, I believe that when you read carefully in the New Testament, science is completely validated. And there are people that want to tell you beyond that within the church who will insist on a very young earth, and that's fine. It may be true. I don't think the Bible's saying that either. Right. And I've had my share of I wouldn't say arguments because I didn't start it. I had people really come out against the idea of you don't accept the young earth. And it's like, I didn't say that. I'm saying that I believe that there's nothing anti-biblical about 4.55 billion years. But they usually don't give you a chance to talk. Now, it's funny because before I started writing this book, a friend of mine who's a pastor who believes in a young earth, we're very good friends. He says, "I want to take you to a place, Paul, called Answers in Genesis." And they do some very nice work, very, very interesting correlations. I like their work. They're young earth people. And the fellow that was hosting the particular lecture we went to refused to shake my hand when he found out I was a geologist. And I was laughing to my friend, Pastor Mish Manigay. I said, I may be more strict on some of my biblical interpretations than this man is, and he doesn't even realize that. I've had the blessing of, I'm on the board of directors of the Base Institute with Bob Cornuke, the Bible Archaeology Search and Exploration Institute. I've taken many classes with Chuck Missler's Koinonia House. The late Chuck Missler passed away in 2018. I've had the blessings of a lot of enlightenment, let's put it that way. And I was sorry to see this kind of response. I have had a student come up to me once. She goes, "Well, I know the Bible's disproven by science." Where are you getting that? So this book to me was something I needed to write. I needed to write. I want people who have that exploration inside of them, waiting to happen, to have a source. And everything I've put in there, they can Google it. They can check it out further. And there's a lot of people that I think will, because there's a lot of questions that we never get to in life. Life is so busy. So putting it in a story, they can go and check it out chapter by chapter. Now, there's a couple surprises, which I don't want to spoil for anybody. But that particular big surprise at the end is completely, in my view, from the way I read the Bible, not out there. It's not ridiculous. It's certainly possible. And I was laughing because someone one day we had a little extra time, maybe the first 6 months the book was out, and I was just Googling to see, and sure enough, I found someone talking about my concept and the possibility. I was laughing because finally, I guess I'm not alone in this idea. But anyway, Crawford, I'm sorry, I didn't mean
No,
to
no, I think it's
the deep
great.
end.
And I think the book is a perfect vehicle to explore these questions of faith because it's much more interesting than if it were just a lecture or a scholarly article on science and scripture. So I think it's
Thank you.
really a fascinating venue because it's entertaining and it's heartwarming as well. And one of
Thank you.
the aspects you touch on is biblical archaeology. I had never thought of that before, but uh, obviously that's part of Bible study,
Yeah.
to see where this came from, when it came from, different editions and so forth. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, biblical archaeology, the most fascinating things that I've worked on, some will be, I'm hoping to do 2 additional stories with my neighbor, John, but there were certain things I've been able to look at up close. One that most people probably would be familiar with who would read the book would be the Ark of the Covenant.
Mhm.
I personally had never, prior to, well, say the early 2000s, would have even considered it being anywhere except maybe hidden somewhere in Israel. And I was blown away by the research that Bob Cornuke had done, following on some others. Graham Hancock had written a book called The Sign and the Seal. But basically, we visited Ethiopia. The Ethiopians have always claimed to have the Ark of the Covenant. And basically, it's not just the Ark of the Covenant. We tend to, I love Indiana Jones' character. I love it very much. And believe it or not, that first movie was taken from a real theory of what could have happened, the disposition of the Ark. But reading the Bible carefully, the Ark of the Covenant seemed to disappear during the reign of the king Manasseh during Israel's history, because he had put in a pagan idol worshiping image, an Ashtoreth pole, in the Holy of Holies. And there's different segments of Christians that maintain, well, it went to the Qumran community or in that desert where the Dead Sea Scrolls were, and then it ultimately, they've got a whole group that believes that. There's evidence that Elephantine Island in Egypt actually had a Jewish temple. They found potsherds that literally were writing to Jerusalem for directions on sacrifices when all sacrifices were to be done at the temple. And then there's the Ethiopian claim. I think all of them are true. I think that Ark of the Covenant, Mercy Seat, were moved to Qumran, then to Elephantine Island, and then ultimately made their way. And when I was on Tanakirkos Island, which was in the middle of Lake Tana, the monks there were showing us artifacts that just had no reason to be there. Mixing bowl of blood, Gomer bent over with age, the almond meat forks had an almond symbol that basically is associated with Judaism. And they were asked, why do you still have this stuff if this all moved when you took it to Axum in Ethiopia? Their answer was perfectly Christian. It said, oh, we were Christian then. We were no longer sacrificing. I was blown away with that because it made sense. It was a good answer. The other thing, the Ethiopians could care less whether or not you believe them, but that's another pretty powerful sign. But there's a lot of things like that I've been blessed to look at. I was in Jerusalem with Bob in 2013, looking for evidence for the temple, and basically Solomon's temple, and the what was rebuilt as Zerubbabel's temple later were in the same location. I know that's been put up there as a, well, maybe it wasn't. No, during the exile in Persia, that was only 70 years long, people still remembered where it was. They didn't go build it in the wrong place. So there's a lot of things like that you can bring to bear. And it does hold up very well, in my opinion. But those are the kinds of things I like to infuse. I think it's kind of fun.
Absolutely. The book is great. It's a spiritual journey. Like I said, it will answer some of the questions that you might have about spirituality and religion. It'll answer some questions you might have about science as well. It is told in a wonderful narrative. It is called My Neighbor
Thank you so
John.
much.
It is written by a real life Indiana Jones, Paul M. Feinberg, PhD. And I was wrapping up, but I got to ask you one more question, Paul. If this were to be a movie, who would you see starring in it?
Well, I think the important the important part for Samuel, we're going to have two, a young one and one recounting the tale. I You know what? I'm still trying to think who that would be, but I do have someone in mind for Mrs. Ortega.
Okay.
And Mrs. Ortega right now, I would love to see if Linda Carter would consent to be playing that part. I would be blown away because I think she would be perfect.
I think she'd be perfect as well. She's a woman of stature, a woman of power and personality, and I think it would be a perfect fit. The name of the book again is My Neighbor John. It's available on Amazon. You can get it on your Kindle or order the paperback so you have it on hand. I prefer that than reading it electronically, but
I'm with you there, Logan.
Absolutely, absolutely. Paul, thank you so much for joining us here today on Spotlight.
Thank you for having me, Logan. I appreciate everything.
I enjoyed it very, very much. To the folks at home, I'm Logan Crawford, thanking you for your time this time. Until next time on Spotlight.